But I want to ask something else. So you said something that this person you talked about liked about the fact of equality between everybody in the Democrat point of view, but equality between what exactly? Like what terms? In
If
what regard?
if I were going to guess, it was basically just a matter that, people, despite their race, despite their background, despite their orientations, they just deserve equality. And one thing that I don't think that that also is an exclusively democratic ideal. In fact, I think that that's just any decent human believes that whether you're black or white, whether you're gay or straight, whether you're old or you're a millennial, that you should have like the same opportunities as everybody else. I don't necessarily think that that means that there have to be the same outcomes. I definitely think that it was the heart of the issue is that people should have equal opportunities.
Oh, got you. Okay. Yeah,
Now,
that's true. I mean, that's not necessarily a democratic point of view for sure.
Masood, what do you think equality of opportunity means?
So I think that what Eric means by that is equality opportunity, meaning that everybody having the same right to find a job or just education or the religion they believe in or their holy book or whatever it is. Like everybody's equal, in terms of whatever they believe in, whatever they want to have, they should have it, regardless of what their race, gender, age, or whatever it is. I think that's what he means, right, Eric?
pretty much. And one line that I'm always very certain to draw is that having an opportunity to something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get all of those things. Like, um, I am 6'3", so if it came down to me and someone who was a foot shorter, I have some genetic advantages over, you know, let's say playing basketball. Now I'm terrible at basketball, but if you're 5'0", you may have the same opportunity, not being discriminated against based off of your race, your religion, your sexual orientation, that sort of thing, but you might not necessarily be able to achieve the same outcome. So basically, there should be no discrimination for someone for a job based off of the fact that they're, gay or black or any protected class. But that doesn't mean that just because that person is that they're going to get the same results if they don't have the same qualifications.
Well, I have an interesting story on that because we pretty much have those laws already. We have the equality of opportunity laws written. Anytime you apply for a job and they specifically ask, what race you are, if you have any government benefits and things like that. Well, I was hired to a job once, and they had thought that on my application I self identified as a group of people, a person receiving government benefits. And they called me into the office and wanted me to sign a document acknowledging that they had hired someone who was receiving this benefit from the government for a program. When I had never marked that on my application, like if I did, it was an honest mistake, but I wasn't going to say, yes, I've received this benefit when I wasn't. Like to me, that would be lying. So when I refused to do that, they were really mad because what's going on is they hired someone to fit into a program that they received money from the government. So incentivizing their hiring of people in that category. Like that's why they cared so much. So really, it's not equal anymore in that regard. It's incentivizing hiring groups of different groups of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about philosophies in general is that we're trying to kind of state if there's a position that's to be held in this. I don't think it's a exclusively democratic position to be seeking that equality. But just because we don't quite have that doesn't mean that that's kind of. I think what you're saying is that the tables aren't necessarily presenting an equal opportunity. It's almost in a direction where certain groups are going to be receiving, additional consideration based off of things such as race, things such as religion, and that's something that I think definitely falls outside of like the libertarian platform. It should be based off of qualifications. It's like, you know, Masood should be in his job because he's the best qualified person to be in his position,
Yeah.
not because he's from another country or
And it shouldn't matter what my name is. Either it's Masood or Eric. I should do the same job if I'm qualified for it for sure.
exactly. And I see an argument that comes up that talks about the supposed wage gap, which is actually correctly characterized as an earning gap. It is law, despite what certain Democratic candidates will say, that a man and a woman who does the same work will receive the same pay. But that doesn't necessarily mean that a man and a woman in the same position are going to receive the same pay. Now, when you start getting into things such as negotiations, amount of hours worked, and even like it doesn't even account for like the same job. There is a breakdown in an earnings gap, and that's something that presents a difference between the equality of opportunity and the equality of outcome. Men and women shouldn't be legislated to earn the same amount if there's a difference in qualification. Like if I were working in the same position as a woman who is eminently more qualified than me, I have no problem making less. But if a woman who works in the same position chooses not to negotiate at the same level for better pay, that's really on them.
The fact that one of our viewers actually, responded in a way that equality is a part of the democratic point of view, I think something that kind of bothers me a little bit about that point of view is that not everybody has to get paid the same. Like you cannot take the money from the middle class and just give it to others. Personally, that's something that bothers me. Like I don't know. Like just personally, I feel like that's not something government should do, and that's too much interference into somebody's private life.
Yeah, so you're against redistributive policies, is what you're saying.
Yes, and that's the only part of the equality that I don't enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is definitely that's the quintessential defining line between an equality of opportunity and an equality of outcome. In a purely redistributive society, let's say a communist society, you'll find that they attempt to equalize the amount earned and doing through distributive means in order to create an equality of outcome, versus in say like a republic style government where you're creating laws in order to make sure that there's an even playing field in terms of not having discrimination based off of protected classes. You're trying to set up for an equality of opportunity, and the outcomes will be achieved based off of things like skill level. So
but it's interesting you talked about equality between humans in physical attributions. Like you told me about the being 6'3", and of course like versus somebody else who might be a little bit shorter or smaller compared to you. That equality is something that God created, or the way we are created, the way we are made, the way we are living our lives, right? That is not, we are not equal. We are totally different. But how do you feel about that?
If my being 6'3" creates a better performance, then that's the sort of thing that is naturally going to create a more incentivize somebody to hire somebody that's 6'3". I'll use the example. I got hired into a security position because the general manager of the store that I was working in literally was standing in my shadow when I first met him, and he's like, "Oh, I think this would be good for security purposes." Now, if someone came in and they were 2 feet shorter, 200 pounds less, they shouldn't necessarily have the same expectations for that, because it is based off of perception of height. But at the same time, I'm also really not going to be the guy that you hire to go into climbing into rafters above buildings, because I can't crawl around because I couldn't fit through many small places that someone else would be able to. Like certain physical attributes are going to be necessary to the job. Certain mental attributes are going to be necessary to the job. And I don't think that it's too much of a stretch to say that someone who's smarter, more capable, and more experienced, just because they have a different opportunity than someone, that they should be paid the same as somebody who has lesser capabilities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I have an interesting question. I hope what might be an interesting question. So you're talking about your height, and as a human, which we all are, right? But we're talking about human, whatever. Okay, so in seeking my future partner, I was very discriminatory based on physical features and emotional features and whatnot. And I wasn't going to give the same opportunity to somebody who was half your height. That just wasn't going to work for me, right? So every human has unique characteristics that set them up for a unique role in the universe. And like, if I did give the same opportunity to somebody who was half your height, like, it wouldn't be nearly as fulfilling for me or that person. Like, I think what I'm trying to say is what makes us unique also contributes to what makes us fulfilled. And it's not always money. It's not always, I want $100,000 a year. Like, maybe it's, I want to spend 40% of my life with my kids. Maybe it's, I want to go, travel the world and only have to work off a computer 20 hours a week. People are fulfilled by different things. So my question, if I can remember what my question was, so it's, as a human being, I am naturally discriminatory, as I feel is to the benefit of everyone. Can we expect our government to be less discriminatory than a natural born individual? And would that be better or worse for society?
I think that the expectation with things such as the Equal Rights Act and the Fair Pay Act does indicate that we would seek to have a government that is less discriminatory, because if I was in a position where I was working with hiring people, and let's just say, and this is not the case, but let's just say hypothetically, I'm a racist individual. I see people coming.
He's not.
I know, I've said this before, but let's say that you came in, Masood, and you interviewed with me, and I look at you and I'm like, okay, and then I find out that you're from Iran. I'm just like, oh, Iran. I don't like those people, therefore I'm not going to hire that person. Like, that's not only, I think, morally wrong, but I think that it's good that that's illegal, because there are bad actors out there, and affording somebody an equality of opportunity should come down to the fact that it shouldn't matter that your name is Masood or Erik. It should matter on the fact that I interviewed with this person, I felt like they can accomplish this job and they're the best choice for it. And it shouldn't have to be but they're from Iran. Like, that doesn't make sense.
It's like bowling. What is it called when you give someone a handicap in bowling because they're a crappy bowler? Like, would you rather have a team of handicapped bowlers, or would you rather have the best bowlers?
They're not handicapped, they're handicapable.
Okay, you're not going there.